Everybody, welcome back to Nightlight Astrology. It's me, Dana. I'm here with Alex today. Alex, how are you?
I am fantastic,
Great.
especially with our year in review.
Yes, I'm so
Looking at the
excited.
year.
So excited. It
Yeah.
feels right. The horoscope duo back together to talk about the year in review. We started the year together. We get to end the year together. So I'm really excited about today's episode. Before we
Me
get
too.
into it, don't forget nightlightastrology.com. The Kickstarter has begun. It's in full effect by the time you guys are watching this. There's all kinds of rewards available for you. If you watch the channel, you know Adam. We were just talking. Adam works so hard to create free content every day of the week. And the Kickstarter is what helps make that possible. So if you're watching this, if you enjoy Adam's content, please consider donating to the Kickstarter if you can. There's plenty of rewards. I know the year ahead readings, we're told those tend to go out first. And that was actually the first time I ever contributed to the Kickstarter. I was lucky enough to snag one of those. And Adam pointed out something about my chart that I hadn't noticed even after 2 years of studying my chart. So even if you think you don't need one, I think it's worth it to check that one out. So nightlightastrology.com for the Kickstarter. You can get great discounts on Adam's astrology programs as well. So be sure to check that out. That ends January 1st, but don't wait because the rewards are limited.
Mhm.
Okay.
There's only a certain amount they can do, man. Just
Right.
crank them out.
Yes. One person cannot, yeah, we don't have a lot. So
Yeah.
get in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're talking about reflecting with astrology, and this is good to do anytime, truly, but it's a perfect time to do it at the end of the year. You don't need to wait till January 1st or the last week of December to start reflecting on the year. And I don't know, I think I have a lot of hot takes about astrology and why we do astrology, but one of them is it should help you deepen your relationship with yourself, and reflecting, the act of reflection is really step one in developing that relationship with
Mhm.
yourself. And astrology can provide a map of sorts to help you see what the landmarks of the year were. And of course, it will also help you deepen your relationship with the planets. It'll help you understand astrology better when you can kind of look at your life through that lens. Alex, do you do this sort of naturally? Do you have a practice of reflecting with astrology? What are your thoughts on this as a practice?
I'm I'm very much of the mind of astrology being the weather, and what are the weather patterns moving through. Maybe that's because I grew up in New England and we're obsessed with the weather and complaining about the weather, particularly in my neck of the woods. Um, But I think what I do, I've had a meditation practice now for actually almost about 30 years. And reflecting with the planetary archetypal symbols, the weather as the patterns come together, is always is not something I do as like I don't obsess about my chart and my transits. Sometimes I do. When I see something scary coming, I obsess and I bring it to a friend who calms me down. But because we all go through that. But um what I do is I look at, well, what were the significant events that were happening at this certain point. Can I go back and look at what the transits were, and then can I reflect on, a, did that go well? B, did it not go well? And if it didn't go well, how can the planetary archetypes help me to do it better, or to understand myself more, or understand the situation more, or understand a different way of interacting with it? Like, for example, even right now, right now when we're recording this, Mercury and Mars are still pretty close together in Sagittarius. And there have been a couple of days this week where I've wanted to say something or do something a little, let's call it rash, a little big, a little, maybe a little dramatic, a little
Hmm.
dramatic. And when you know the astrology, I'm just reflecting, like, Mercury and Mars are conjunct. Is this the best time? Is this the best weather for me to make some big dramatic statement to somebody? Or should I take a breath, because this can be said, this doesn't have to be said right now, and it can be said at another time. And so I'll do that. Like, that's what's happening right now. And actually, it was a really good call, because actually the situation resolved itself and I didn't have to get into any kind of drama about it. It was perfectly fine. So I'll look back in the year like that, and sometimes I'll say, like, yeah, I could have done that a little better. And Mars or Mercury or whoever it was in this, Jupiter or whatever. It's like I see where that was. I see where I got caught. That'll be an interesting reflection for the next time. But the one thing I just want to say quickly is something I don't support is using astrology to like beat yourself up or freak yourself out. Even though it happens, when you study astrology, that is not to me a conducive use of the art, because it's just, we can only improve from where we are, and none of us can incarnated here to be perfect and to not make mistakes.
So well said. I think the first point you brought up about having a meditation practice, like that's really what astrology can become for you. But it's funny because I think a lot of us come to astrology kind of with the mindset that we're saying maybe is not the most helpful. Like we want to know what's going to happen. And that's so human and natural. I mean, I'm definitely not immune to that. Like we all want to know.
Me either.
We want to know, and it's human
Yeah.
nature to be curious, and it's okay to look to the future and to get a sense of what lessons are coming, but not to grip to what's going to happen. And I love just how you explained your own practice. It reminded me how eventually we get there. I think astrology becomes our meditation practice, our be here now practice, our radical acceptance of, for instance, for me this year, there was an eclipse on my birthday. Okay, like what's going to happen is going to happen. And I will learn through it all. And that's the whole point. Astrology can really help us learn through our circumstances, no matter what they might be.
Yeah, I think that, there's this pervasive. I've been studying astrology formally since about 2017, but I definitely started looking at astrology more around 2015. And if you really read astrology content, a lot of times it just seems like it's always a mess. It's always the full moon that does this, or the new moon that does this, or it's always, this is the time where the fifth dimension, or it's always that, and it's like it really, a lot of it, astrology is just, it's just a reflection of life. And to me, this is my personal view. I don't think everything is astrology. I don't think everything happens in reflection with the planets. I think there's a much more complex web that's happening, in terms of our consciousness and all that. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. But I just think it's really important to recognize that astrology is uh, it's not always the negative. I think it can sound like that. And what I will say though, in fairness, is 2020 was a wildly weird year. There have been some very, very unusual alignments that have been happening even still then, since then. So it may feel like that a little bit more, and especially with the state of the world right now, it can definitely feel like that. But I think it's also good to look at astrology as a sense of like it's your friend, it's your guide, it's a tool, not the tool,
Yeah,
it's a tool to look at energetic weather. Um, and that it doesn't always have to be something that's ominous or scary, or you have to sit there kind of biting your fingernails wondering what's going to happen. I think it's important to look at it as a broader, bigger art than that too.
absolutely. And that's my intention for this episode today is that we can give anyone that's listening a step into just some gentle being present with what happened this year and using the archetypes as a
Hmm.
way to think through that and feel through that too. So, that being said, we have a couple of transits or moments from the year that we want to talk about. And I don't know about you, Alex. I'm going to share a little bit from my personal experience just because that's the experience that I had. And we can talk a little
Yeah,
bit from a broad perspective as well about maybe what this might have brought up. But yeah, does that sound good to you?
let's do it.
Sweet.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have to start with the start, and that was Mars retrograde and Mars being in Cancer for roughly 10,000 years, aka like 6, 7, 8 months ish. So I'll give you the timeline. It Mars moved into Cancer in September of 2024, September 4th. Um, and then it moved out and retrograded in Leo. So from September 4th to November 4th, we had Mars in Cancer. Moved into Leo, stationed retrograde, back into Cancer, and we started the year with Mars in Cancer. So from December 6th, 2024 to February 23rd, 2025, Mars was retrograde. And then Mars didn't move out of Cancer until April. So the first 4.5 months of the year, we had Mars in Cancer. And for half of that, it was retrograde. We also, I will add to this, had Venus retrograde March 1st through April 12th. And I remember at the beginning of 2025 looking at that part of the year and being like, oh God, just not looking forward to it, generally speaking. Being a
Hmm.
Libra rising, I just was like, Venus retrograde has not been super fun for me the past couple of years. Um, so I know when we were looking at this, I remember us having conversations about this on the horoscope episodes, and you saying something like the beginning of the year is like a Mars moment. Do you remember? I know this was a while ago, but do you remember any of your thoughts around that? Because I thought you had a really good take on that.
Mars was to me the ruler of the first 6 months of the year, and Jupiter is the ruler of the last 6 months of the year. Especially right now, Jupiter is responsible for a lot and in dominant position to all the inner planets and responsible for Neptune and Saturn right now. So in the North Node. So Mars began the year to me. This is my take, especially beginning with the I think it was the full moon on January 13th that was conjunct the full moon in Cancer was conjunct Mars in Cancer, Mars retrograde in Cancer. That kicks off a period of feeling that the house is unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of archetype.
Mm-hmm.
The inner space is unsafe. The inner space has I don't know how many times I talked about Stephen King's novel of It during the Mars retrograde, right? That's a very, I know it's a really extreme image, but the idea that like things that are supposed to be innocent aren't, things that are supposed to be kept safe aren't kept safe. Sometimes the reality that it should not happen, but it does. That horrible things happen in places where they shouldn't, with an innocence where it shouldn't happen. But it also, Mars retrograde in Cancer is the beginning of the healing process on a more internal level or energetic level, of an internal process of understanding where those places are. Because I think the important thing to remember about the novel of It, and sorry for the spoilers here, my friends, but if you're terrified of clowns, you don't want to watch this anyways, I promise you, um, is that the clown is a proxy for something else. There's a bigger thing going on in that book. And that's what Mars is to me. Is like Mars is opening up like, what's the real issue going on here that's causing the anxiety, the feelings of this feeling like something's off, right? Something's not quite right in here. Jupiter comes along and begins to, in June, stitch that up. Now, I think that rose-colored Sagittarius that I was like, well, Jupiter's going into Cancer above, you know, but you forget sometimes, stitches are painful.
Mm.
And that's what Jupiter's doing. Jupiter is stitching things up, but like you have to clean out the wound, and you have to go. You have to get stitched through.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Jupiter is doing, especially over the retrograde cycle. But yeah, that's how I've kind of seen it over this year.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that was beautiful. I love bringing it into this because I do think sort of on a similar but different level. It's funny, I was just talking to my stepdaughter yesterday about it. She's reading Pet Cemetery right now, and she loves horror
Mm-hmm.
books.
Sure.
And she was talking about Beverly and how some people online have things to say about Stephen King and that are kind of ignorant. And I was like, I just feel that, and I never fully read the book, so don't come for me, anyone who's a huge Stephen King fan, but I think this book is a lot about loss of innocence.
Yeah.
The story seems to be a lot about loss of innocence
Yeah.
and exploring what that's like. And I do think about Mars and Cancer for that as well. Sort of from the lens of the idealism maybe being a little bit tested, and there being a lot of challenges that we have to kind of not just deal with, but be confronted by. It feels very confronting to me, and very tender as well. So it may be that someone on the outside looking in, it doesn't look like a whole lot is going on, but there's a lot of emotional processing going on behind the scenes. Um, and I might be sort of interposing my own experience here with this transit, but it's something about dreams deferred almost. Like it reminds me of that Langston Hughes poem. And I don't know if I'm just totally going off the rails now, but that is what that transit reminds me of. It's kind of recognizing where something's run its course, where you have to change course, and not in a subtle way. It's a very confrontational, emotional, needing to pull out a splinter.
Yeah, well said. Well said. That it's like I love that idea of being confronted because I think that one of the things that can happen where the idyllic version of the water signs, especially Pisces and Cancer, there's a sense of like the idyllic space where things will be, the idyllic, especially in Cancer, the idyllic home, the idyllic, and then when you're confronted with the reality of things that is just not pretty,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an understatement sometimes. And I think that's one of the things that again, I love Stephen King's books, and I think they have a much bigger meaning beyond the horror aspect of it. I think he actually writes about some really deep human themes in them in a lot of ways. That's something he and Adam has a ton of videos on his chart. By the way, he has Mars and Cancer natally, but there's something about that sense of like these are things that are true.
Yeah.
We don't. I wish they weren't true in the world. They are true. They happen, and Mars sometimes just like you said confronts us with that. And I think sometimes for signs like Cancer or Pisces, like those can feel that's extra confronting because it's
Yeah.
extra sensitive. It shouldn't happen in these spaces. This shouldn't be something that goes on, but it does. And we can work to make sure it doesn't, but they do. So that was a rocket. That's one of the things I was describing of like an unusual thing
Mm-hmm.
that's been having it. Like that was one of the harder periods I've seen since the Mars retrograde in 2020 when Mars was, backing up against Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn. That was just a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think to add another layer to this, it could have one of my big takeaways for this year is something Adam says a lot, and that's that good and bad are relative, and we what's good on a material level might be bad for us spiritually and vice versa, and that proves so true for me this year. So I will say, like, before getting into you know more about
Mm.
this, when we're thinking about Mars and Cancer, I do think one positive thing that could have come from this thing that looks objectively difficult, and I'm sure was difficult for many people, is being roused to fight for what matters to you. I always think about one of my best friends has Mars in Cancer, and she is a medium actually, and into astrology. And she's like, I love my Mars in Cancer because I am a ride or die. And I've said it before on the show, like, this is the person who will get in a fist fight for you. You may not want it to come to that, but they will. And I think all of us could have maybe experienced that, which it's not necessarily a fun experience to be so worked up that you're ready to go to war, literally or figuratively. But sometimes that's what's needed. And sometimes we need to get angry. Sometimes anger is the appropriate response. And I hope that some of us were able to develop a better relationship maybe with our anger this year from this transit.
For sure. That's a confronting emotion for me. Literally being confronted with it, but how to be angry in a healthy way.
Mhm.
Neither repressing it nor making it a big drama, right? Or harming. But, anger, I always say is, it's part of your energetic immune system. Healthy anger. This is not okay. This is a boundary that has been infringed upon, violated, whatever, and it's not all right. So yeah, absolutely. And so, and I'm always interested too, and I've talked about this on this podcast on my Substack too, about Jupiter is now retrograding over that part of the zodiac where Mars was. And I'm so curious about how the stitches are gonna come in.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's what this process is up until, that really Jupiter keeps that part of to that part of the zodiac where Mars was up until July of next year. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think a
Yeah.
perfect way to set ourselves up to move through that future that's coming really mindfully is what came up in January through April
Yeah.
for you in the part of your chart that contains Cancer. I think we can also look at Aries because we had Venus retrograde during this time as well. Obviously, Mars rules Aries, so there is some maybe interconnected things going on.
Mm.
I don't want to like tell my whole life story here, but the first 4 months were nuts. March, April, May, absolutely nuts. June, mind-blowingly crazy. Now we're doing the astrologer thing where we're like, everything is crazy. Oh my God. But it really
Yeah, that's
was
all right.
like when I look back on those months, I can see what was building. And I wouldn't have known it
Mm-hmm.
then. It felt a lot like, interestingly, and I think this is because I had Saturn moving over a lot of personal planets, including my ascendant ruler, including my sun. Um, it felt like being squeezed. I definitely
Mm.
felt like there were a lot of things to do and a lot of things to deal with and not a lot of time to really like process. I definitely noticed confrontations in my work. Mars was in my 10th house that during those first several months in Cancer. Boundaries being crossed with students lying about using AI and lots of confrontations on that front, which that hasn't gone away, to be fair, but it was a little more, I don't know if I want to say serious, but there were lots of meetings and things like that. So,
Mm.
um, where think people were angry. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're out there wondering, like, how do I do this for myself? It's really simple. You just think about the area of life that Cancer activates in your chart, what confrontations, what provocations, what boundaries were crossed, what were you mad about, what came up in that part of your chart.
So well said. I mean, like if this was in your first house, what was being confronted about your identity?
Mm-hmm.
What was in your second house, which just quickly, it's like what would be confronting about your self-worth, your self-value, your money, your resources. The third house, what did your mind confront you with? What was your everyday experience confronting you? In your fourth house, your family, your ancestry. You can go around, and even if you look up the houses online, just get a sense of them. What was what we like data sound like what were we being confronted with at that point? Like it's my 12th house, right? So I was confronted with a lot of old things that I was just in denial about in my subconscious. And I was like, no, that's real. That was actually real. Like that was not a ghost. That was an actual real thing, and it's hard to see that shit sometimes. Really hard to see because you make up all sorts of like, oh, it wasn't actually, or it wasn't you. Especially when you have a strong Neptune like I do. Oh, it was whatever. But taking a look at it from that perspective, especially in hindsight, you can do some really cool reflective journaling, meditation, ritual around what was that, what was it affecting in my life, and then how can I integrate, resolve, release, transmute, work through whatever that was. And it probably is somewhat still in process just because Jupiter is on the exact same part of the zodiac now for the next 9 months or so.
Beautiful.
Mm, mm,
Well, I would love to know, just out there, let us know how Mars treated you the first couple
mm-hmm,
of months of the year. That for me was, I don't want to call it the highlight, but it was sort of the big thing that was happening the first several months.
mm-hmm.
And then it was really a year of ingresses. So we had lots of ingresses and retrogrades back out. March 30th, Neptune entered Pisces. May 24th, Saturn entered Aries. June 9th, Jupiter entered Cancer. And July 7th, Uranus entered Gemini. And now three of those planets have moved back out. Saturn moved back into Pisces September 1st. Neptune moved back into Pisces October 2nd. And Uranus moved back into Taurus on November 7th. So we got a taste of what this uh, new paradigm sounds very dramatic. I don't know about all that, but something new. We got a taste of it. um, and I was really like side eye emoji with the Uranus and Gemini moment, especially because I have placements at the very beginning degrees of Gemini. Um, So I have some thoughts about how it went for me, but Alex, I would love to know, did you notice anything with the ingress of the outer planets?
Yeah. So for, Neptune has been in my eighth house since 2012, which is a vibe.
Yeah.
And sort of definite vibe, Saturn since 2023. There was a sense of quickening.
Mhm.
And now moving into the ninth house, especially into a fire sign, I was like, ooh, what do I really believe? What are my beliefs? With Neptune, when one of the things with Neptune and Pisces is interesting is it shows you, I think it shows us for better or for worse where we've merged, where we've attached our belief identity, whatever it is, to somebody else's, right? And especially the eighth house, there's a sort of like the ledger that's going on there. Like, am I in balance with this? Whatever. Ninth house is just like it really. I remember when Saturn moved in, I was like, what do I believe? Like at this point in my life, like I've had my beliefs through my life, but like now I'm finishing up all the midlife transits, and now I'm like, what's about me, Aries, right? Me, what's my spark about? And yeah, Uranus has been opposing my Mercury for the last few months. So I've definitely had some innovative thoughts, some innovative ideas, and but I'm also because and see, this is a great example. This is about knowing astrology, right? Because I knew Uranus was going to go back into Taurus, right? And I knew Saturn and Neptune were going to do one more pass through Pisces. I was like, these are great ideas. And my watch word for Uranus, or my catchphrase for Uranus is great with an idea and terrible with a plan,
Oh,
like horrible with a plan. Just, well, here's a great idea, right? So I knew that, and I was like, you know what? This isn't this these are great ideas to take note of, to practice, to understand, to get good at my communication around them, but it's not quite right yet for them to implement. And I know that in my inner being, in my intuition, and I know that in the astrology. So that's just an example of how it showed up for me. Tell me how it showed up for you, because I'm super curious.
first of all, I felt personally attacked. Great idea, no plan. That is just me every day. But a little too relatable. Yeah, I'm interested that you brought up the ninth house because that was sort of the focal point for me as well. So Uranus is Gemini, excuse me, is my ninth house. I have Mars at 1 degree Gemini and Jupiter at 0. And I had some opening when it came to my spirituality, which sounds so generic, but I couldn't even and I love to talk, but I don't think I could explain to someone else it was a felt experience.
Mhm,
It was
mhm.
it was like understanding something that you knew logically, but suddenly it's embodied and it's like you get it on a totally different level. So I can't tell you what happened. I can only say like something shifted, something changed within me. Um, and I feel now that of course, like we're all always learning and spirituality is a never ending practice, but I feel like I have a deeper sense of what is capital T true for me through my lens. Um, and I've really embraced too, and I'm actually just realizing this as we're talking, like I've made a shift in my work from being purely based in astrology, which I still love, obviously. It's a tool that I will always use, to being more like brave enough to call myself like a spiritual coach, which I had a lot of hesitation and reservation around, a lot of fear around. And a lot of this work, I think, of Uranus in my ninth house has helped me sort of accept and embrace that. Also, on the point that astrology is not just, psychological, I started working with a spiritual coach. And I
Amazing.
think that really helped me see like she became, I don't want to do what she does, but just even knowing her and speaking to her, forget what we talk about in the sessions, although that's all incredible as well, but just simply her existence sort of like gave me some kind of path or permission slip of like, oh, this is actually what I'm trying to do anyway. This is what I've always been trying to do with astrology. I now can, I'm allowing myself to do new things and try new stuff and put myself out there in new and different ways.
Oh, I love it so much. I love it so much. It isn't that so Uranian too, where it's just like, and on your Jupiter and Mars particularly, like here's my spiritual, the ninth house. So, those of you who are looking at your chart, the ninth house has a lot to do with spiritual beliefs, philosophy, law. Um, the way we make sense of the world is the way I think of the ninth house. A lot of the way how we kind of tie things together in patterns and codes and things like that. And the Saturn and Neptune in my ninth house, which is a little bit different. It's more like dissolving old merges and breaking old spells, and which is interesting though, because it's had a very similar result for me with a very different type of archetype. And so yeah, I've been having my own sort of realizations about myself with that. So I love hearing that.
Very
It's very
cool.
validating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fun, I think, to hear others' experiences with the planets too, because even just that exchange, like we can see some kind of like similarity and say, oh, that's what the Uranus experience is, or at least for some people sometimes. We can never catalog every experience you could have, but it just helps you deepen your understanding. And I think with Gemini as well, just thinking about Gemini energy, I don't think it's a coincidence that like someone else helped me have that deepening and insight. So if you're out there wondering like how did this show up for me, think about obviously where is Gemini in your chart, what house, and then have there been other people that have come through? Have you like stumbled upon a podcast somewhere or a post on social media, maybe
Amazing.
Alex's Substack, you were like, oh wow, that. So I don't know. Think about the people that maybe open something up for you in the area of life that Gemini activates for you.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
We have to talk about Jupiter and Cancer. I know we already have a little bit.
Let's do it.
I need to say this, and I don't, this is going to be an unpopular opinion maybe, but Jupiter and Cancer has not been my favorite.
Mm.
Maybe I'm waiting for it to
I
get
think that
good,
that's
but
actually a more popular sentiment than you might think. We've gotten that a lot in the I've heard that a lot. Like, wait a second. But please
well,
continue.
I
I
think,
just want to say I don't think you're alone on that.
okay. I and somebody needs to say it. I remember in June there was a really beautiful new moon co-present with Jupiter. Jupiter might have been conjunct, if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
Yeah, it was.
Yet there was that square with Jupiter and Saturn still in effect. And I remember being so excited for that new moon. And when it came that whole week, I was really feeling the effects of the square the most. Um,
Yeah.
and I was talking to my friend, the medium, about this, and she's like, I'm glad you're saying that it's been tough because I feel a little guilty or bad, like I'm missing something, like I'm missing some good opportunity from the universe. This is a bit of a sidebar, but I don't want anybody out there to feel like, oh, I'm missing something. Like Jupiter in Cancer is happening and I'm not like drowning in abundance right now. It's just I think what Alex said at the top of the episode is what we got to remember that we're maybe in the healing process right now and that's not always fun, exciting or pretty.
All right, so let's have real talk here. First of all, I will say that we as astrologers, unintentionally and with best of intentions, sometimes oversell Jupiter. I think I think there's a little bit, and maybe this is my own projection of my own stuff. There's an astrological savior complex we put on Jupiter. Like Jupiter's going to be strong, and
Mm,
the world will,
yes.
Now, I I think also that the effects of a water sign are not as in your face as a air sign or a fire sign. I think I'm very curious when Jupiter moves into Leo next year, what happens.
Yeah.
But I think that these are when you move into a water sign, it's a little bit more like I'm trying to think of like even like you guys can see the painting, the Marc Chagall painting behind me, an impressionist painting. That's a very watery type of
Mm,
painting. I have very little water in my chart, so I try to have my a lot of watery type things around me, so just to balance out the elements. Or like impression in that's not really impressionistic, but like there's like impressionistic music like Ravel or Debussy, like that has this kind of like flowy, watery feeling. So it's hard to say like this is the thing or this is the thing or Jupiter is this is Jupiter's thing. It's like it's all happening kind of holistically. That doesn't make it easy and it doesn't necessarily make the healing comfortable, but it is something that I've been learning and taking, and we're always learning, God knows we're always learning from the transits too. I've really been learning that like a water healing is very, very different than like a fire healing. A water ceremony is very different than a fire ceremony. And I think that Jupiter is, it's like when the drop that spreads out slowly across the pond.
Mhm.
And I think this will be something that when we look back from this place next year, when Dana and I are back with you next year, we'll say, oh, that's what Jupiter was doing. Oh, that was the process that was going on. But I think right now, the acuteness of the healing and the other stuff that's going on is quite dramatic, can feel destabilizing, maybe masking that a little bit. It may be hard to see the forest for the trees, in other words, maybe a shorter way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree that, and maybe it's like, look, astrologers are humans too. We want to romanticize and like, especially after some very hard years collectively, we see Jupiter in Cancer
Yeah.
and we want we want it to be all that it can be and more. And um I'm just always kind of floored by astrology reminds me of how maybe like easy it is to fall into black and white thinking, right? And good or bad, this or that. Um, and you touched on learning, and I think that Jupiter is great for that. And it's kind of interesting and fitting too that this is about reflection. Like, what's the purpose of reflection? To make sense of things, to bring coherence into our daily lives and experiences. And we're at a point right now where we may not have, as you said, the full story yet. There's more to come, but we can start to really make sense of what that Mars retrograde and those many months were of slogging were
Yes.
about. And as we have that sense of understanding and like, this is the story of what happened there. Now I can understand why it doesn't feel like sunshine and rainbows and the Cancer part of my chart, but I am building towards something. I bet a lot of us can feel that, especially when we juxtapose what's happening now with what was happening at the beginning of the year.
Oh my God, so well said. I wanted to get up and cheer, but I don't really have the space to do that right now. Because I'm very big. But there's you know, one of the things that has been very instrumental in my own healing throughout, my own process is you get to a point where you know what happened and you know it wasn't okay. And but you need to make sense of it. You need to order it somehow. And it's not an excuse, and it's not saying like, oh, everything happens for a reason, because I think that's one of the most patronizing terms that ever comes out. Tell anybody who's gone through something really serious, oh, it's happening for a reason. Like I just don't appreciate that phrase at all. I don't think it always does. I think sometimes things just happen. But since they have happened,
Mhm.
since they are a reality, and that's that Mars confronting you, right? It's like, since this is a reality, what do we do?
Yeah.
How do we stitch this up? How do we make sense of it? How do we make meaning out of it? And that's all the province of Jupiter. I think, Jupiter represents the coherent structures that tie us together that are not altogether tangible. Codes that we live by, philosophies that we live by, religious and spiritual traditions, which they may have like, written word or instructions, but they're also describing something kind of ephemeral that's trying to be sort of brought into one narrative. That's Jupiter's land. That's Jupiter's province. And so I think that um, we're in the process right now of making sense. And sometimes when you're in that process, it doesn't feel like, things don't feel yet like they make sense. And that's why I'm saying, like, I'm curious even by March when the retrograde is over. Jupiter will station direct, I think it's March 10th, not 9th or 10th. What happens then? Very curious. Because I think that's a point where we really come to like I'm starting to see how this was all fitting together.
Cool. Yes. Mark it on your calendars. Um, shoot. It would be really cool too, just to take this reflection step a bit further. And I bet a lot of people out there are already doing this. You can track not just through the lens of the Gregorian calendar, of course, but also through the lens of transits. So you could just, instead of starting with 2025, start with Jupiter. Jupiter's ingress into Cancer, Jupiter's retrograde. And of course, I know Adam talks about this a lot on the channel. You can go back to past times where Jupiter was in Cancer. Um, and all of that can be super duper helpful. Do you have
Yeah.
a year of 2025 takeaway, Alex? I know it's like a huge question to ask, but like, what if you could think of one thing that you learned from 2025, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't even know how to answer. Okay. One thing I will say is that what I have learned, which is a difficult one for a Sagittarius, two things can be true at the same time.
Hmm.
That one has always been tough for me. I've heard people say it. I'm like, and conceptually, I love it, but I'm like, but I'm always like, but what is the truth? Like, there's got to be, And now I have really realized this year, and I think mostly internalized, two things can be true at the same time. It can really be the best of times and the worst of times. It can really be awesome and a shit show. This can be true and that can be true, and sometimes they seem to contradict each other. I think I might be getting a little bit better with contradiction and paradox and complexity and mystery, even though I don't like it because you don't know it. You want to know it.
Yes.
But I think that's my big takeaway, and really knowing that for myself, not just as a concept.
Mm, that's amazing. I love that. That sounds um maybe like a frustrating experience, but definitely a really helpful one.
Yeah, it's actually settling.
Good. Good.
It's settling.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought about it from an astrological lens first. That thing that I feel like I'm learning over and over again, that good and bad are relative, because when I looked ahead at the year, at the beginning of 2025, the end of 2024, I saw on my birthday this eclipse happening. My Saturn was going to be conjunct my sun at the same time. I was very nervous, and that's all happening in my sixth house. So I was like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
getting like, am I going to get sick? Like, you just go to the worst case scenario, even though you know not to. That's what comes up. And that ended up being such a beautiful and cathartic few days. Like, an
Mm.
eclipse in my 12th house with Saturn conjunct my sun in the 6th looks objectively hard. The lived experience of it was um, a massive healing. And the kind of
Mm.
big picture takeaway was I'm actually not alone in the world. Like, there was this sort of subtext in my heart of like, I'm doing everything by myself. And I was able to go through an experience that helped me see that's not true. And it just makes me think
Wow.
about like Saturn, right? Can be indicative of like feigned appearances. Like, the feigned appearance was that I'm doing this all by myself. And there was this just massive opening. So ironic, because you would never guess that. Like, if I got a reading, a year ahead reading, no astrologer would tell me that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So that was really cool, because I think it is a good reminder moving forward of like, we can look and we can make educated guesses, but we really don't know. And the way it's going to play out is going to be it's going to be whatever you need in that moment, and just embrace it
Amen.
all. Uh,
Oh,
yeah.
amen. Well, even as an astrologer, and I'm always learning how to craft this more finely in readings too. Is that is definitely a time we would look at, right? Like that would catch your eye as a transit if that was coming up for your client at some point. But it's like this is a time I would highlight. This is a time I'd be aware. This is a time I would notice. This is a time especially like the sixth house too. Those all. It's easy to overlay, and I've done this too for God knows, what I know about astrology onto and go, oh my God, right? Because I also come from a long line of catastrophizers, so it's kind of goes with us. But that's where the meditation's been very helpful.
Mm.
But I think that what I love about what you're saying though too, Dana, is that there's curiosity there. And see, that's what I found with astrology too, is like when I feel a transit or know a transit, I'm like, how can I get inside of this and see what it's illuminating inside of me? And that's where practice and ritual and um, consider in reflection and all of that really helps. Is that it's like I think sometimes what we're thinking is there's a separate universe out there that's doing something. And even if
Yes.
we don't think that, we kind of talk like that, right? Where's my gift from Jupiter? Where's the bad thing that's coming from Saturn? Where's it? We think like, they're kind of lobbing all this, throwing this stuff down to us like we're on some like weird game show,
Mm-hmm.
down here. And like and, and so I think like one of the things to be mindful of is the weather. It's psychic, energetic
Mm-hmm.
weather. And what's happening in your own internal weather, and what are you noticing? Can you approach it with curiosity? Sometimes it shows up in the external world in ways we might not expect. But that curious, I'm interested in this. I will sometimes look up, and I don't. Sometimes when Saturn's opposing my Saturn right now, right? It's stationing opposite my Saturn. I'm finishing up my second Saturn opposition, and it feels like every time I pull out to drive somewhere, there is someone in front of me going 20 miles an hour. It doesn't matter where I'm going. It doesn't matter what I'm doing.
Oh man.
I was so what I've learned to do is I just kind of giggle and I glance up and I say, "Message received, dude. Message received." And they usually will turn away, right? That it's just like they're just kind of it's just like this is the weather. The weather right now
Yeah.
is that there's just going to be things that are moving a little bit slower, and this is a representation of it. And I can approach it that it's not a serious situation. Although in New England we take that seriously. We should not great drivers up here, but just to like look and just be like, okay, wink, I got you.
Right.
And then sometimes things happen, and sometimes things happen that are astrologically visible, and sometimes things don't. Like I said, sometimes I really do think two things can be true at once.
Yep.
Things are astrologically noted, and sometimes things happen. And what do we do when they have happened? You know?
Beautiful. Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
that was amazing. Um, I would love if those of you out there listening could share your big takeaways from this year. I'd love to hear how the astrology showed up for you. Alex, you're a Substack writer. Well, tell us about
yeah.
that and what else, how else we can work with you.
So I'm at the Subtle Universe on Substack. I do two written newsletters a month, the new moon and the full moon. And then I do for paid subscribers, I do video content in different tiers, which you can check out on my Substack. And you can also book readings with me at alexamorosi.com. And you can do energy work and energy healing with me there. That's a way where we interact with the energy. So we're not passive recipients of it, but we're interacting beings with the interaction of the energy itself, which is really fun to do.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Um, I will tell you guys where you can find me as well. You're not on Instagram still, correct? He's off the grid, off the meta
Oh,
grid.
it feels so good.
Good.
It just does.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my Jupiter and Cancer in the 12th house, right?
So
Going
say
into a
goodbye.
safe little shell. Yep. Shutting it down for a year.
Okay, I love that. I am
Yeah.
still on Instagram, but I'm really just repurposing my TikToks. So the real talk is I'm on TikTok. I am sometimes on
Mm.
Instagram. Both places, Dana.Solara, Solara, danasolara.com. I'm self-publishing a journal, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited about that. It'll be available by the time people are watching this, so you can go to my socials, go to my website, and you can find out more about that. It's called Aligned and Free, and it's about healing from people pleasing.
Ooh, sign me up.
I'm so
That's
excited. Yeah, the proofs will be here on Sunday. So anyway, that's what I've got going on.
so exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Cool. Well, and don't forget about the Kickstarter. I'm just going to plug that one more time. Definitely support the Kickstarter if you made it to this point of the episode. And yeah, Alex.
Just quickly on that, guys. If you're thinking of taking one of Adam's courses, he offers significant discounts
Mhm.
on the Kickstarter for his courses, and I think I've taken three. I think I can't remember, but I know I did his horror course through the Kickstarter, and it not only helps support admin, the work he does, and all of his incredible staff that now he works with in his school, for teaching. But it's just a great way of, like, you can take these incredible courses and really get, for a pretty significant discount, if I remember what he does. I
Yes.
don't know what he's doing this year. I haven't looked at it yet, but they have been in past years.
Yeah, it's
So,
absolutely, if you're wanting to take courses, you should do so through the Kickstarter. You're going to get the best deal on the course. So,
yeah. Yeah, for
good
sure.
reminder. Okay, well, happy New Year. Happy end of 2025. Until next time, guys. We'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.